Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with the most embarrassing work by Brahms. Yeah, really. How could Brahms possibly be embarrassing? He was the acme of musical learnedness and good taste and all of those wonderful values. Well, let me tell you something. It's really kind of important, I think, in our enjoyment and love of music and discussion of the classics and all that stuff, that we not delude ourselves that everything is equally wonderful or that everything has to be equally wonderful, and that we not drink the Kool-Aid of the classical music industry, the military industrial complex, in believing that whatever a great composer does is just dripping with the fingerprints of dripping fingerprints. I don't know, dripping with the excreta of his greatness. That's just not true. Everybody has good days and bad days. Sometimes people are more perfect than at other times. And it's okay to talk about this stuff. It's always going to be a source of controversy, of course, because anything I hate, you will love, or anything you love, I'll hate. We're all going to go back and forth on these things. But there are some works about which there is a certain judgment of history. And that judgment of history is what it is. There isn't any arguing with it. The fact that you may like it, well, nobody cares. No one cares if you like something. No one cares if I like something. We're talking not about our personal preferences. We're talking about what the consensus seems to be and why that consensus seems to be. And so the work by Brahms, which one of you already mentioned, it's very funny. I did one video in this series, and then someone said, do Brahms, it's Rinaldo. And you're right, it's Rinaldo. I mean, the fact that it just popped up like that so quickly, I think is evidence of the truth of what I'm saying. What is Rinaldo? Do people even know that Brahms wrote Rinaldo? I mean, I didn't. I didn't know there was a Rinaldo until I got a complete Brahms edition. I had no clue at all. It's evident by its absence. It's been recorded a few times, actually. There may be, I don't know, 4 or 5 or 6 or maybe even more, who knows, recordings of it. Rinaldo is a cantata. It's a cantata for male voice, rather small and uninteresting sounding orchestra, only 2 horns, and orchestra, and tenor solo. There's a tenor solo who is Rinaldo. It's got all of the hallmarks of Brahms' exquisite aesthetic refinement. The poem is by Goethe. I mean, that you got to have a poem by Goethe. It's like if you're Russian, you've got to have a poem by Pushkin. Well, if you're German, you've got to have a poem by Goethe, because that assures that you are operating at the highest and most elevated and lofty level in terms of the text. But of course, who cares about the text? What we care about is the music that's set to the text. So Goethe wrote a poem. It's based, of course, on Gerusalemme Liberata, the story of Rinaldo, which has been the subject of all kinds of fabulous operas. And, Handel, one of Handel's greatest operas and all that stuff, And, of course, the point of Rinaldo is not Rinaldo. The point of Rinaldo is Armida, the sorceress who has enchanted Rinaldo. And the story is between Rinaldo, the story is the conflict between sensual pleasure and the call of duty. Now, Brahms was never one for sensual pleasure. Let's face it. I mean, except when he paid for it. He would hang out with hookers once in a while. But essentially, Brahms was not a musical sensualist by any stretch of the imagination. So that in this particular cantata, which is all male, Armida never even appears at all. I mean, so the first problem with this, and it's a pathology which modern scholarship is trying to turn into something like positive, is the complete lack of sensuality or sex appeal in this music. I mean, that's what the thing is about. Rinaldo's call to duty only exists in opposition to a very real, very vivid, but morally debased and all of that stuff. Sensuality, represented by the sorceress Armida, who was also the source of many wonderful operas by, like, for example, Rossini and Dvorak and people like that. So many composers have attacked this subject. And when Brahms did it, now they say, well, it reflects Brahms' autobiography and his relationships with women and his pathology about his mother. And who cares? That's like saying, well, I love it anyway. I mean, no one cares. What matters is the music itself, and the music is extraordinarily dull. This is Brahms' largest choral work after the German Requiem. It lasts about 45 minutes or so. 45 minutes, somewhere in there. And it is uniformly gray and drab and uncompelling. And that's actually what the reviews of it when it was first performed were. It was a big flop. Unlike the German Requiem, because Brahms finished it right after the German Requiem in like 1868. He'd been working on it for about 5 years. And it didn't get much revived, and Brahms never was recorded as saying, oh, drat, Rinaldo is such a masterpiece. I really wish that everybody loved it the way I love it. No, that never happened either. He seemed content to let Rinaldo fade into oblivion. And it's been revived because nowadays, despite the fact that the great composers and Brahms who wrote hundreds of pieces of music, it's not enough. It's never enough. There always has to be more. There always has to be a discovery, and a discovery that involves a neglected work by a major composer. But some things are richly deserving of their neglect, and Rinaldo is definitely one of those. I think that I just think that we are desperate to believe that to surrender our sense of judgment, our critical faculties, and simply accept it all as the record labels are telling us to do, and as the military-industrial complex is telling us to do, and now as musicology is telling us to do, and say, oh, it's just all equally marvelous. It's so wonderful. And here's this big, long, dreary, drab cantata thing. And it's got to be a hidden masterpiece. We've got to figure out why. We've got to, squirrel around and come up with justifications. But the fascinating thing about it is that those justifications are seldom musical. They're autobiographical. They're historical. They say, well, this is going to give us an idea of what a Brahms opera would have sounded like, so it's valuable. Well, no, it's not. If this is what a Brahms opera would have sounded like, thank God he never wrote one. He understood that he was not one to write an opera, and he didn't, and good for him. Why do we have to yearn after that which he didn't do and would never have done well when we can enjoy all the things he did do fabulously? Isn't it enough? It's sort of a psychosis. It really is. And so I have no hesitation whatsoever in acclaiming Rinaldo Brahms' most embarrassing work. And Brahms' embarrassment, of course, means something very specific, doesn't it? Because he was never one to be vulgar or tasteless, but he could be boring. He could be pedantic. He could be pedantically boring. And Rinaldo is all of those things. You hear his love of Mozart and Beethoven and the Baroque and all of that stuff that he would mix into this, his antecedents, the things that matter to him. But it all adds up to a snooze fest. And sometimes it happens that way. Sometimes all the talent in the world isn't going to get you past the finish line if the story itself, the subject that you've chosen, requires elements that you're not able to supply. And the story of Rinaldo requires that. It may be that Goethe's poem is magnificent as poetry. That doesn't mean that it's ripe for a musical setting. That was one of the great mistakes that Romantic composers made. They felt that if you had great poetry, you would have great music by association. And it doesn't work that way at all. Not a bit. Not a bit. So there you have it, friends. Brahms' most embarrassing work. Oh, God, it's just boring. So So keep on listening, friends. And you can even go listen to Rinaldo if you've got 40 minutes to snooze yourself with. I mean, why not? Give it a shot. Figure it out and come to your own conclusion. The purpose of these videos is to issue a challenge, isn't it? And I know you're up for the challenge. Although whether you're up for Rinaldo or not, well, that's an individual choice. So take care, my friends. Thank you so much for joining me.